War Scout Commander Vexithara stood on the bridge of her ship, looking at the small yellow star that humans called the sun. Her purple skin glowed softly in the dim light of the control room. She had done this 17 times before. 17 worlds had fallen to the Zephyrian Empire, and each victory had been quick and easy. "Commander, we are now past the gas giant they call Jupiter," said Scout Captain Kylvin from his station. His 4 eyes blinked in sequence as he read the data from his screens. "The third planet from their star shows signs of life. Lots of life." Vexithara nodded. The pattern was always the same. Find a world with primitive people. Count their warriors. Send back the numbers to the Empire. Then watch as the invasion fleet arrived and conquered another world for their glorious cause. "How many inhabitants?" she asked. "About 8 billion, Commander," replied Scout Lieutenant Mordek. His tentacles moved quickly over his controls. "That is more than usual, but nothing we cannot handle." The commander smiled, showing her sharp teeth. 8 billion was indeed a large number, but most of those would be farmers, builders, and other weak civilians. The Empire had conquered worlds with large populations before. What mattered was the size of their armies. "Begin detailed scans," Vexithara ordered. "I want to know everything about their military forces. How many warriors do they have? What weapons do they use? How are they organized?" The ship moved closer to Earth, hidden by their advanced cloaking technology. No primitive world had ever detected a Zephyrian scout ship. Their science was far too advanced for these simple creatures to understand. Far below on Earth, Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison sat in the orbital defense station called Sentinel-7. He was drinking coffee and watching the screens that showed space around Earth. It was a quiet night shift and nothing unusual had happened for weeks. "Hey Jake, are you seeing this?" asked Operations Specialist Lisa Carter. She was pointing at one of her monitors. "I'm getting some weird readings near Jupiter." Jake walked over to her station and looked at the screen. There were small blips that appeared and disappeared quickly. "Could be solar interference," he said. "Or maybe some space junk we haven't cataloged yet." "Maybe," Lisa said, but she didn't look convinced. "It's just that the pattern looks organized, like something is moving in a controlled way." Communications Officer Ryan Brooks looked up from his desk. "Should we report it to command?" Jake thought for a moment. "Keep monitoring it. If it gets closer or shows any aggressive behavior, then we'll call it in. For now, just log it in the daily report." None of them knew that they were being watched from above. On the Zephyrian ship, Scout Ensign Zara Lynn was studying the human settlements. "Commander, their cities are very large, much larger than anything we have seen before." "That means nothing," Vexithara replied. "Large cities just mean more civilians to control after we conquer them." "What about their armies?" "I am still scanning," Zara Lynn said. "But Commander, they seem to have many different armies, not just one." This made Vexithara pause. Most worlds had one army, maybe two if there were different tribes fighting each other. "Explain." "Well, there are groups called Americans, and Chinese, and Russians, and many others. Each group seems to have its own army." "Interesting," the commander said. "That should make conquest easier. Divided armies are weak armies. They will fight each other instead of fighting us." But as the hours passed, the reports from her scouts became more puzzling. Scout Lieutenant Mordek was studying North America when he called out in surprise. "Commander, you need to see this. These humans called Americans have something called an army, but they also have a navy and an air force, and something called Marines and Space Force, all separate but all working for the same leaders." Vexithara frowned. "How many warriors in total?" "For just the Americans?" "Over 1 million active soldiers, Commander." The bridge fell silent. 1 million soldiers for just one group on the planet? That was already larger than most armies the Empire had ever faced, and there were many other groups on this world. "Keep scanning," Vexithara ordered, but her voice was less confident now. Down on Earth, Major General Patricia Hayes was watching a training exercise at Fort Liberty. Hundreds of paratroopers from the 82nd Airborne Division were practicing their jumps. The sight of so many soldiers working together filled her with pride. "General, the NATO observers have arrived," said her aide, Captain Amanda Torres. "Colonel, Danny Rodriguez is briefing them on Operation Atlantic Shield." Patricia nodded. "Good. Make sure they see how well our forces work with our allies. Integration is key to our defense strategy." She watched as American soldiers trained alongside British, German, and French troops. They shared equipment, communicated in multiple languages, and coordinated their movements like parts of a single machine. None of them knew that alien eyes were watching their every move. In space, Scout Captain Kilvin was becoming more worried by the hour. "Commander, I have finished scanning Europe. The humans there also have large armies, and they seem to work together with the Americans." "Work together how?" Vexithara asked. "They have something called NATO. It is like an alliance. If one group is attacked, all the others will help fight." This was completely outside Zephyrian experience. Conquered worlds usually had tribes that fought each other. They had never seen a planet where different groups actually helped each other fight against outside threats. "How many warriors in this NATO alliance?" the commander asked. Kilvin checked his readings. "At least 3 million active soldiers, Commander. Maybe more." Vexithara felt a cold chill run through her body. 3 million soldiers was larger than the entire Zephyrian invasion fleet, and they had only scanned 2 continents so far. "Continue the survey," she ordered. "But prepare the ship for immediate departure if needed." The alien scouts kept working, but with growing fear. Each new discovery made the humans seem more dangerous, not less. These were not primitive tribes with spears and clubs. These were organized armies with advanced weapons and global coordination. Back on Earth, Air Force Colonel Kevin Murphy was coordinating with Navy Admiral Susan Clark on a joint training mission. Fighter jets screamed overhead while warships moved in formation offshore. "Beautiful sight, isn't it?" Admiral Clark said as she watched the coordinated display of military power. "Yes, ma'am," Colonel Murphy replied. "Makes you proud to be part of something this big." Neither of them knew that their training exercise was being recorded by alien scouts who were beginning to realize they had made a terrible mistake. High above them, Commander Vexithara stared at the growing pile of intelligence reports. Everything she thought she knew about planetary conquest was being challenged by this strange world called Earth. "Commander," Scout Ensign Zara Lynn called out nervously, "I have been monitoring their communications. They have something called the United Nations. It seems to be a way for all the different human groups to work together." "Work together on what?" Vexithara asked, though she was beginning to fear the answer. "Military cooperation, Commander. They share intelligence, coordinate training, and have mutual defense agreements. When one group is threatened, many others send help." The Zephyrian commander looked out at the blue and green planet below. For the first time in her career, she was beginning to wonder if her empire had chosen the wrong target. The scouting mission was supposed to be simple. Count the warriors, assess their weapons, plan the invasion. But nothing about this world was simple, and they were only beginning to understand just how complex and dangerous humanity really was. Commander Vexithara divided her scout team into groups. Each group would study a different part of Earth. This was standard procedure for the Zephyrian Empire. Know your enemy before you strike. "Scout Lieutenant Mordek, you take North America," she ordered. "Scout Ensign Zarlin, focus on Europe. Scout Captain Kelvin, study Asia. I want detailed reports on military strength, weapons, and leadership structure." "Yes, Commander," they replied together. Mordek began his detailed scan of North America. He expected to find maybe 50,000 warriors total. That would be a large army for any world the Empire had conquered. But what he found made his tentacles shake with fear. "By the 7 moons," he whispered as data filled his screens. "Commander, you need to see this." On Earth, Major General Patricia Hayes stood on the observation deck at Fort Liberty. Below her, thousands of soldiers from the 82nd Airborne Division were conducting training exercises. The sound of helicopters filled the air as troops rappelled from aircraft and practiced combat maneuvers. "General, the joint exercise with the Marines is going well," reported Colonel Danny Rodriguez. He was watching American soldiers work alongside Marines in amphibious assault training. Excellent, Patricia replied. How are our NATO allies doing? British forces integrated perfectly with our units yesterday. The French paratroopers are scheduled to join tomorrow's exercise. German logistics teams are already setting up supply lines. Patricia smiled. This was what made human military forces special. They could work together across nations, languages, and cultures. Each country brought its own strengths to create something more powerful than any single army. High above, Scout Lieutenant Mordek was trying to count the soldiers involved in the exercise. But every time he thought he had a final number, more troops appeared. Transport trucks brought in fresh units. Helicopters delivered additional equipment. Ships offshore unloaded more Marines. Commander, he called out with a trembling voice, the exercise I am watching involves over 30,000 soldiers. And this is just training. This is not even a real battle. Commander Vexithara felt her blood run cold. 30,000 soldiers in a single exercise? The largest army the Empire had ever faced had only 20,000 warriors total. It gets worse, Commander, Mordek continued. I have identified at least 12 different military bases in just this one region. Each base has thousands of soldiers, and there are bases like this all across the continent. Across the ocean, Scout Ensign Zara Lynn was having similar problems in Europe. She was studying a NATO headquarters in Belgium where military officers from dozens of countries were working together. This is impossible, she muttered as she watched the human activity. Officers speaking different languages used computers to coordinate between armies thousands of miles apart. They shared intelligence, planned joint missions, and moved resources across borders as easily as if they were all part of the same military. On Earth, General Carlos Mendez was briefing his staff about Operation Atlantic Shield. Our Italian allies will provide air support while British naval forces secure the approach routes. German armored divisions will advance alongside our forces, and French special operations teams will handle reconnaissance. General, what about logistics? Asked Colonel Beth Turner. Moving supplies for so many different armies could be complicated. Already handled, Carlos replied. The Americans are providing transport aircraft, while Dutch and Norwegian forces are managing supply depots. Polish and Czech units will handle ammunition distribution. Scout Ensign Zara Lynn listened to this conversation with growing horror. These humans were not just working together within their own tribes. They were combining the strength of dozens of different nations into single, coordinated military operations. Commander, she reported to Vexithara, Europe has something called NATO with 29 member nations. Each nation contributes soldiers, equipment, and resources. When combined, their total military strength is, she paused to double-check her calculations, over 3 million active soldiers. Commander Vexithara had to sit down. 3 million soldiers was more than the Empire had used to conquer the last 5 worlds combined. That cannot be correct, she said. Recheck your numbers. I have checked them 4 times, Commander. The number keeps getting larger as I discover more military units. Meanwhile, Scout Captain Kilvin was studying Asia and making equally disturbing discoveries. Commander, the nation called China has over 2 million soldiers. India has over 1 million. Japan has a smaller army but very advanced technology. South Korea has 600,000 soldiers despite being a small country. And they fight each other, yes? Vexithara asked hopefully. Surely they are enemies. Some have disputes, Commander, but they also have defense agreements and joint training programs. And when threatened by outside forces, they tend to work together. Back on Earth, Admiral Susan Clark was meeting with her counterparts from allied nations. The Pacific Defense Initiative is working well, she told Admiral Chen Wei from China and Admiral Tanaka from Japan. Our joint naval exercises have improved coordination significantly. Agreed, replied Admiral Chen. When facing external threats, our nations have more in common than our differences. Admiral Tanaka nodded. The threat simulation exercises showed that our combined naval forces are much stronger than any individual fleet. High above, the alien scouts were beginning to understand that Earth was unlike any world they had ever encountered. Most planets had small armies that fought each other. Earth had massive armies that helped each other. Commander, Scout Lieutenant Mordek reported again. I have discovered something called the National Guard. These are part-time soldiers who train regularly, but have civilian jobs. The Americans have over 400,000 of these reserve soldiers. Reserve soldiers? Vexithara asked. Soldiers who can be called to active duty during emergencies. Every major nation on Earth has similar reserves. Some countries have more reserve soldiers than active ones. Scout Ensign Zara Lynn added her own disturbing discovery. Commander, I have been studying their military academies and training programs. They produce thousands of new officers every year. Their military education system is more advanced than our own. On Earth, Captain Nicole Stewart was working at NORAD, the North American Aerospace Defense Command. She was monitoring the strange readings that had been detected near Jupiter. Colonel Gregory Adams, she called to her superior. Those gravitational anomalies are getting stronger, and they seem to be moving in a pattern. Colonel Adams looked at her screen. What kind of pattern? Like a ship, sir. A large ship that is somehow hidden from our regular sensors. Keep monitoring it, Adams ordered, and prepare a report for Brigadier General Paul Jackson. If something is watching us, we need to know about it. The humans were becoming aware of the alien presence, but they were not panicking. Instead, they were following procedures that had been planned for decades. Commander Vexithara called her scouts together for a status meeting. Report your findings, she ordered. North America has over 2 million active soldiers and millions more in reserves, Mordek said. Europe has over 3 million soldiers in NATO alone, Zara Lynn added. Asia has over 6 million soldiers across multiple nations, many with defense agreements, Kylvan reported. Vexithara stared at the numbers. That is impossible. No single world could support armies that large. Commander, Scout Captain Kylvan, said quietly, I think we have made an error. This is not a primitive world with small tribes. This is something else entirely. What do you mean? Vexithara asked. I mean, this is a world that has turned warfare into a science. They have military, universities, research centers, and training programs that never stop. They produce soldiers, weapons, and military technology constantly. Even their civilian industries can be converted to military production quickly. The alien commander looked at the blue and green planet below. For the first time in her career, she was beginning to think that some worlds might be too dangerous to conquer, but she had not yet seen the full scope of human military capability. The worst discoveries were still to come. Deep inside the Pentagon, General Charles Warren walked into a secure conference room. The meeting was classified at the highest level. Only a few people on Earth knew about the Global Defense Initiative, a secret program that had been preparing for this day for over 50 years. Good morning, everyone, General Warren said as he took his seat. Around the table sat the most powerful military leaders in America. Admiral Helen Parker represented the Navy. General Robert Chen spoke for the Army. Air Force General Maria Gonzalez had flown in from Colorado. Each of them carried briefing folders marked with red warning labels. Let's get straight to business, Warren said. NORAD has confirmed unusual activity in our solar system. Something is watching us, and it's not from Earth. Admiral Parker opened her folder. Sir, our deep space monitoring stations have detected cloaked vessels using technology we don't understand. The ships are definitely not human. How many ships? Asked General Chen. At least one large vessel, possibly more. They've been observing us for several days now. General Gonzalez leaned forward. Are we talking about first contact, or are we talking about an invasion? Unknown at this time, Warren replied. But we're not taking any chances. I'm activating Protocol 7. The room fell silent. Protocol 7 was the plan for defending Earth against alien invasion. It had been updated and refined for decades, but no one had ever expected to use it. High above Earth, Commander Vexithara was receiving reports that made her question everything she thought she knew about warfare. Her scouts had been working around the clock, and each new discovery was more disturbing than the last. Commander, Scout Lieutenant Mordek called out urgently. You need to see this immediately. Vexithara hurried to his station. On the screen was a massive military complex that stretched for miles. Thousands of vehicles were moving in organized patterns. Aircraft took off and landed constantly. Soldiers marched in perfect formations. What am I looking at? She asked. This is just one military base, Commander. The humans call it Fort Bragg. It houses over 50,000 soldiers, and this is only one of hundreds of similar bases around the world. Vexithara stared at the screen. 50,000 soldiers in a single base? The entire Zephyrian military had only 300,000 soldiers total. There's more, Commander. Mordek continued. I've been monitoring their communications. They have something called Special Operations Forces. These are elite soldiers trained for the most difficult missions. On Earth, Major Andy Russell was leading a joint training exercise involving special forces from 12 different countries. American Green Berets worked alongside British SAS, German KSK, and French Special Forces. Each unit brought unique skills and equipment. Remember, Andy told the assembled soldiers, we're not just training to work with our own forces. We need to be able to integrate with any allied military unit at a moment's notice. The exercise involved night operations, urban warfare, and coordinated strikes. But what impressed the watching aliens most was how smoothly soldiers from different nations worked together. They shared equipment, coordinated attacks, and communicated as if they had trained together for years. Impossible, whispered Scout Lieutenant Mordek. These elite units from different nations work together better than most single armies we have conquered. Meanwhile, Scout Ensign Zarlin was studying European military capabilities and making equally shocking discoveries. Commander, I have found something called the European Union Battle Groups. These are rapid response forces that can be deployed anywhere in the world within 10 days. How large are these battle groups? Vexthara asked. Each battle group has about 1,500 soldiers, but they represent multiple nations working as a single unit. And there are multiple battle groups ready at all times. Colonel Beth Turner was coordinating with her counterparts from Australia, Canada, and New Zealand on something called Operation Southern Cross. The exercise involved forces from 4 different continents working together to respond to a simulated crisis. The beauty of our alliance system, Beth explained to her staff, is that we can combine the strengths of many nations: Australian intelligence, Canadian logistics, New Zealand special forces, and American firepower, all working toward the same goal. The alien scouts were beginning to understand that human military cooperation went far beyond simple alliances. These were complex networks of mutual support that spanned the entire planet. Commander, Scout Captain Kylvan reported with fear in his voice. I have discovered something terrible. The humans have been preparing for space warfare. What do you mean? Vexithara asked. They have a military branch called Space Force. It's new, but they are already deploying weapons and sensors in orbit around their planet. At that moment, Space Force Colonel Derek Powell was working with NASA Administrator Dr. Janet Kim to activate Project Skywatch. This was a secret program that had been waiting for exactly this situation. Colonel, how long until all sensors are online? Dr. Kim asked. Another 6 hours, ma'am. Once Skywatch is fully operational, we'll be able to detect any cloaked vessel within 1,000,000 miles of Earth. Good. And the orbital defense platforms? Still classified, ma'am, but let's just say any uninvited guests are going to have a very bad day. Captain Luis Martinez was aboard the space station Freedom 1, deploying advanced sensor arrays that the aliens had never seen before. These sensors used quantum detection methods that made cloaking technology much less effective. Earth Control. This is Freedom 1, Louise reported. Sensor deployment is complete. We are detecting multiple anomalous contacts in near-Earth space. Copy that, Freedom 1. Continue monitoring and report any changes immediately. The Zephyrian scouts suddenly realized that their cloaking was becoming less effective. Human technology was adapting to their presence faster than they had thought possible. Commander, Scout Ensign Zaralin called out in panic. They are starting to see us clearly. Their sensors are getting stronger. But the worst discovery was yet to come. Scout Lieutenant Mordek had been studying human military history and found something that terrified him. Commander, I have learned about something called total war. When humans are truly threatened, they can convert their entire civilization into a military force. Explain, Vexithara demanded. During their Second World War, some human nations put over 10% of their population into military service. They converted factories to make weapons, civilians became soldiers, and entire economies focused on warfare. That's impossible, Vexithara said. No civilization can sustain that level of military mobilization. They did it, Commander. And they did it while fighting wars on multiple continents at the same time. The alien commander felt sick. If humans could mobilize 10% of their population for war, that meant they could potentially field an army of 800 million soldiers. There's more, Mordek continued. I studied their current military reserves. Most nations maintain what they call draft systems. In a true emergency, they can force millions of civilians to become soldiers. On Earth, General Warren's meeting was entering its final phase. Ladies and gentlemen, we have confirmation that we are being observed by an alien intelligence. This is not a drill. What are our orders, sir? Asked Admiral Parker. We implement Phase 1 of Protocol 7 immediately. All military forces worldwide are to be placed on high alert. Our allies are being notified through secure channels. Are we going to make contact? Asked General Chen. Not yet. First, we show them what they're dealing with. If they're here to invade, they need to understand the size of the mistake they're making. General Gonzalez smiled grimly. Operation Demonstration is ready to go, sir. We can have coordinated military exercises running on every continent within 12 hours. Do it, Warren ordered. Let's show our visitors what Earth's military looks like when it's fully awake. High above, Commander Vexithara was beginning to realize that her empire had made the biggest mistake in its history. This was not a primitive world with scattered tribes. This was a planet that had turned warfare into an art form, where billions of civilians could become soldiers and dozens of nations could fight as one. The scouting mission was supposed to be simple, but nothing about Earth was simple, and the aliens were about to learn just how dangerous humanity could be when threatened. Commander Vexithara stood at the center of her ship's bridge, her forearms shaking as she held the latest reports. She had demanded a complete count of Earth's military forces. What her scouts had found was beyond her worst nightmares. Give me the final numbers, she ordered, her voice barely above a whisper. Scout Lieutenant Mordek cleared his throat nervously. Commander, the total active military personnel across all human nations is approximately 26 million soldiers. The bridge fell completely silent. 26 million. The entire Zephyrian Empire had conquered 17 worlds using a total military force of less than 500,000 soldiers. That cannot be correct, Vexithara said weakly. I have checked. The number's 12 times, Commander. But it gets worse. Their reserve forces add another 30 million trained soldiers who can be called to active duty quickly. Scout Captain Kylvin added his own horrifying discovery. Commander, I have studied their military production capabilities. In a full war, they estimate they could arm and equip over 100 million soldiers. Commander Vexithara had to lean against her command chair to keep from falling. 100 million soldiers was more than the total population of most worlds the Empire had conquered. On Earth, Major Andy Russell was leading the largest joint military exercise in human history. Operation Global Unity involved forces from 47 different nations. The exercise was taking place simultaneously on 6 continents. This is incredible, Andy said as he watched American soldiers work alongside troops from Brazil, Nigeria, Australia, and India. I've never seen coordination like this. The exercise had been planned for years, but it was being activated now for a very specific reason. Humanity's leaders wanted to send a clear message to whoever was watching them. At Fort Bragg, Colonel Beth Turner was coordinating with military bases around the world. Tokyo base reports ready. London command confirms green status. Sydney operations is standing by. Excellent, Andy replied. Begin Phase 1. Across the planet, military forces began moving in perfect coordination. In North America, the 82nd Airborne Division conducted massive parachute drops while the 1st Armored Division moved hundreds of tanks across training grounds. Fighter jets from the Air Force flew in formation with Navy aircraft launching from aircraft carriers. Scout Ensign Zara Lynn watched in horror as European forces joined the demonstration. British paratroopers jumped from aircraft while German Leopard tanks rolled across training fields. French fighter jets screamed overhead as Italian naval vessels moved in formation offshore. Commander, they are doing this on purpose, she reported. This is not normal training. They are showing us their strength deliberately. How do you know? Vexithara asked. Because they are all moving at the same time, across the entire planet. No military exercises this large and this coordinated by accident. In Asia, the demonstration continued. Chinese forces conducted amphibious assault training, while Japanese destroyers patrolled nearby waters. South Korean artillery units fired synchronized salvos while Indian mountain troops practiced high-altitude warfare. Scout Captain Kylvin was trying to count the vehicles and aircraft involved in the global exercise. Commander, I count over 50,000 military vehicles in motion. Tanks, trucks, helicopters, fighter jets, ships. They are moving everything they have. But the worst part was still to come. The aliens watched as forces from different continents began working together in real time. American transport aircraft picked up European soldiers and flew them to training sites in Africa. Australian ships carried Canadian forces to joint exercises in the Pacific. Brazilian and Nigerian troops trained together in urban warfare scenarios. Colonel Henry Walsh was coordinating the demonstration from the Pentagon. He was watching live feeds from military bases around the world, and even he was impressed by the scale of what humanity had achieved. General Warren, all forces report ready for Phase 2, he announced. Proceed, General Warren replied. Phase 2 involved something the aliens had never seen before. Every major military alliance on Earth activated simultaneously. NATO forces in Europe began coordinated maneuvers. The Rio Treaty brought together military forces from across the Americas. ANZUS connected Australia, New Zealand, and the United States in joint operations. Air Force General Tracy Nelson was watching the air operations component of the demonstration. Colonel Walsh, we have over 3,000 military aircraft airborne. Simultaneously, this is the largest coordinated air operation in human history. Copy that, General. Navy reports are equally impressive. Navy Admiral Carl Jackson was monitoring naval operations from the Pacific Fleet headquarters. We have carrier battle groups, submarine fleets, and amphibious assault forces from 14 different nations operating in coordinated formations. The logistics alone should be impossible, but here we are doing it. The alien scouts were witnessing something that challenged every assumption they had about planetary warfare. Scout Lieutenant Mordek was studying the communication networks that allowed this massive coordination to work. Commander, their military communication system spans the entire planet. They can coordinate between forces on different continents as easily as we coordinate between different rooms on this ship. That level of coordination requires advanced technology, Vexithara said. They have it, Commander, and they have been building these systems for decades. This is not something they created quickly. This is the result of long-term planning and preparation. Scout Ensign Zaralin made another disturbing discovery. Commander, I have been monitoring their civilian response to this military demonstration. They are not afraid or confused. They seem to expect this level of military capability from their governments. What do you mean? I mean their civilians have been prepared for large-scale military operations. They have civilian defense organizations, emergency response systems, and industrial networks that can support massive military campaigns. On Earth, the demonstration was reaching its peak. Forces that had never worked together before were operating as if they had trained together for years. Language barriers disappeared as universal military protocols took over. Equipment from different nations worked together seamlessly. Major Lisa Green was leading a combined unit of American, British, German, and Polish soldiers in urban warfare training. The integration is perfect, she reported to her commanders. These soldiers from 4 different countries are operating like a single unit. How is that possible? Asked Colonel Beth Turner over the radio. Years of joint training exercises, shared equipment standards, and common operational procedures. We've been preparing for exactly this kind of coordination. The aliens were beginning to understand that this was not just a military demonstration. This was humanity revealing that they had been preparing for interplanetary warfare for decades. Scout Captain Kylvin discovered evidence of secret military programs that made his blood run cold. Commander, they have been planning for extraterrestrial threats since their 1940s. They have organizations specifically designed to detect and respond to alien contact. Impossible, Vexithara said. I have intercepted their classified communications. They call it the Global Defense Initiative. It has been operating in secret for over 70 years, preparing for exactly this situation. Colonel Derek Powell was coordinating with military space assets that most humans didn't even know existed. Orbital Defense Platform 7 is online and tracking multiple targets. We have clear firing solutions on all unidentified contacts. Rules of engagement? Asked his communications officer. Weapons hold for now. But if those contacts make any aggressive moves toward Earth, we are authorized to fire immediately. The aliens suddenly realized that humanity had weapons in space pointing directly at their ships. Commander, Scout Lieutenant Mordek called out in panic. They have orbital weapons platforms, multiple platforms, all targeting our position. Commander Vexithara looked at the blue and green planet below and felt true fear for the first time in her life. This was not a primitive world with scattered tribes. This was a military civilization that had been preparing for interstellar war for generations. The scouting mission was over. Now it was time to decide whether the Zephyrian Empire would survive the encounter with humanity. Commander Vexithara stared at her command screens in complete silence. The numbers were impossible to ignore. Her empire's largest invasion force had been 500,000 soldiers, and that had been enough to conquer every world they had ever encountered. But Earth could potentially field an army of 100 million trained soldiers. Commander, Scout Captain Kylvin said quietly, we need to make a decision. The humans know we are here, and their weapons are targeting our ship. Vexithara looked at her crew. Fear was written on every face. They had come expecting to scout a primitive world with scattered tribes. Instead, they had discovered a planetary military superpower that had been preparing for interstellar war for decades. What does the Empire Manual say about situations like this? She asked. Scout Lieutenant Mordek checked his computer. There is no manual entry for this situation, Commander. The Empire has never encountered a world with military capabilities this advanced. Then we will have to write new procedures, Vexithara said grimly. On Earth, Colonel Henry Walsh was coordinating the final phase of Operation Global Unity. Military forces around the world were moving in perfect synchronization, creating the largest display of coordinated military power in human history. General Warren, Phase 3 is ready to commence, he reported. Begin Phase 3, General Warren ordered. Let's show them what happens when Earth truly mobilizes for war. Phase 3 was the demonstration that would change galactic history forever. Every military reserve on Earth was activated simultaneously. National Guard units, military reserves, and territorial defense forces from every nation began mobilizing at the same time. Major Andy Russell watched in amazement as his training base filled with tens of thousands of additional soldiers. I've never seen mobilization this fast, he told Colonel Beth Turner. It's like the entire planet decided to become a military force overnight. That's exactly what happened, Beth replied. Every defense treaty, every mutual aid agreement, every military alliance on Earth just activated at once. The alien scouts watched in horror as Earth's military forces seemed to multiply before their eyes. Scout Ensign Zara Lynn was frantically trying to update her count of human soldiers. Commander, the numbers keep growing. Every few minutes, more military units become active. They are mobilizing forces I didn't even know existed. How many now? Vexithara asked, though she dreaded the answer. Over 50 million soldiers are now active or mobilizing, Commander, and the number is still climbing. Air Force General Tracy Nelson was overseeing the largest air operation in human history. Fighter jets from dozens of nations filled the skies in coordinated formations that stretched across multiple continents. This is incredible, she told Navy Admiral Carl Jackson during a secure video call. We have pilots from 40 different countries flying in perfect formation. The coordination is flawless. Same with naval operations, Admiral Jackson replied. Ships from every major navy on Earth are operating as a single fleet. It's like watching the birth of a truly planetary military force. The aliens were witnessing exactly that. Scout Captain Kylvin had been studying human military doctrine and made a discovery that terrified him. Commander, I have learned something about human warfare that explains everything we have seen. Tell me, Vexithera said. Humans have a concept called escalation dominance. They believe that the best way to win a war is to be so overwhelmingly powerful that the enemy never wants to fight in the first place. And everything we have seen is designed to demonstrate that Earth has escalation dominance over any potential invader. They are not just showing us their current military strength. They are showing us what they could become if truly threatened. Colonel Derek Powell was monitoring the alien scouts from his Space Force command center. Advanced sensors were tracking every move the alien ship made. "Sir, the alien vessel is showing signs of preparing to withdraw," reported his communications officer. "Any aggressive actions?" Powell asked. "No, sir. If anything, they seem to be backing away slowly, almost like they are afraid to make any sudden movements." "Good. That means the demonstration is working." Captain Luis Martinez was aboard the space station Freedom 1, watching the alien ship through high-powered telescopes. "Earth control. The alien vessel is definitely withdrawing. They are moving away from Earth orbit very carefully." "Copy that, Freedom 1. Continue monitoring but take no aggressive action unless they threaten Earth directly." On the alien ship, Commander Vexithara was facing the most difficult decision of her career. Her orders had been simple: scout the planet, count their warriors, and prepare for invasion. But those orders had been written assuming that Earth would be like every other world the Empire had conquered. "Scout Lieutenant Mordek, what is your final assessment of human military capabilities?" Mordek looked at his data one last time. "Commander, Earth represents a Type 4 military civilization. There is no such classification in our system," Vexthara said. "I know, Commander. I had to create a new category. A Type 4 military civilization is one where the entire planet functions as a single, coordinated military force. They have the ability to mobilize over 100 million soldiers, coordinate operations across multiple continents, and maintain technological superiority over any invasion force we could possibly send." Scout Ensign Zara Lynn added her own analysis. "Commander, even if the Empire sent every soldier from every conquered world, we would still be outnumbered by human forces, and that assumes we could get our armies to Earth without being destroyed by their space-based weapons." Commander Vexithara made her decision. "Open a communication channel to the Zephyrian High Command." "Yes, Commander." The transmission would take several hours to reach the Empire's homeworld, but Vexithara began recording her message immediately. "High Command, this is War Scout Commander Vexithara reporting on the Sol 3 scouting mission. I am recommending immediate termination of all invasion plans for this system." She paused, knowing that her next words would shock the Empire's leaders. Sol 3, known locally as Earth, is inhabited by a species that has achieved planetary military unification. They maintain standing armies totaling over 26 million soldiers, with reserve capabilities exceeding 100 million. Their technology includes space-based weapons, global communication networks, and industrial capacity that exceeds our own. More importantly, they have been preparing for extraterrestrial contact for over 70 years. This is not a primitive world caught by surprise. This is a military civilization that has been waiting for us. I am recommending that Earth be classified as a protected zone under Article 15 of the Galactic Conquest Protocol. Any attempt to invade this world would result in catastrophic losses for the Empire." Commander Vexithara ended the transmission and turned to her crew. "Prepare for immediate withdrawal. Set course for the outer rim of this system." "Yes, Commander," her crew replied with obvious relief. On Earth, General Warren was receiving reports from military commanders around the world. Operation Global Unity had been a complete success. "Sir, all Allied forces report successful completion of the demonstration," Colonel Walsh reported. "We have confirmed that our observers received the message clearly." "Excellent. Begin standing, down to normal alert status, but keep all early warning systems active." "What about the alien ship, sir?" "Our Space Force assets are tracking it as it leaves Earth orbit. It appears to be withdrawing peacefully." General Warren smiled grimly. "Then our demonstration worked exactly as planned. We showed them what they would be facing if they decided to invade Earth." High above, Commander Vexithera watched Earth shrink in her ship's rear display screen. The blue and green planet looked peaceful from this distance, but she now knew the truth. Earth was perhaps the most dangerous world in the galaxy, not because its people were violent, but because they had learned to work together. "Commander," Scout Captain Kylvin asked, "what do we tell the other scout fleets when they ask about Earth?" Vexithera thought for a moment. "We tell them the truth. We tell them that some worlds are not meant to be conquered. Some worlds are meant to be left alone, not because they are weak, but because they are so strong that even looking at them the wrong way could be dangerous." As the alien ship disappeared into the darkness between stars, Earth's military forces began returning to their normal duties, but they did so with quiet satisfaction, knowing that their decades of preparation and international cooperation had successfully protected their world without firing a single shot. The greatest victory was the one that never became a battle.